Hello, and welcome to the Career Journey podcast, No Wrong Choices, where we speak with some of the world's most interesting and accomplished people to shine a light on the many different ways we can achieve success. I'm Larry Samuels, soon to be joined by Tushar Saxena and Larry Shea. To help support our show, please be sure to like and follow No Wrong Choices on your favorite podcasting platform. Connect with us on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, X, and Threads, or visit our website at NoWrongChoices.com. This episode features the medical journalist, author, professor, and MD, Randi Hutter Epstein. Tushar, as in some ways a fellow journalist and writer and reporter, why don't you lead us into this conversation?
All I'll say is this. If you look at this woman's resume, we are not smart enough to speak to this person. I got to be quite honest with you. Look, she obviously is a prolific writer, and she went to not only journalism school, but she said, okay, that wasn't enough. I'm going to go to medical school as well. Just for the hell of it. I mean, that is crazy, the amount of academic rigor that you have to go through with this. And she has managed to build a career as a freelance journalist. I don't think she's ever had a full-time gig. She's worked obviously places, but I don't think she's ever had a full-time gig. Now, you look at my resume, it goes from freelancing to full-time positions, freelancing to full-time positions. I have a good mix. But for someone to say that they're going to essentially build their career around never having a full-time gig, that takes a heck of a lot of courage. And Randi Hutter Epstein is no joke when it comes to speaking to people who know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I'm going to second your thought about the resume. Again, I am feeling like a bit of an underachiever as we're
all underachievers next to her.
Embark on this incredible interview that we're about to do. And you're right, she's an impressive person. And we're going to have a lot of fun with this one. I can't wait to dig in because she wears a lot of hats, and I can't wait to see how they all fit together. You're right, T. Who goes to medical school with no intention of practicing?
Just for the hell of it.
And we're going to dig into that. So she's fascinating person, and we can't wait to talk to her.
Yeah, I'm sure this is going to be a great conversation. I will share that I know her, and I know her energy level, and I know how interesting she is. So I have absolutely every confidence in the world that this conversation will live up to the expectations that we are setting. So with that, here is Randi Hutter Epstein. Now joining No Wrong Choices is the medical journalist, author, professor, and MD, Randi Hutter Epstein. Randi currently teaches journalism at both Yale and Columbia University while working on her next book and writing the occasional article for the New York Times and other national publications. Randi, thank you so much for joining us.
I am so thrilled to be here.
So I suppose, as we often do on this program, I should offer my full disclosure that Randi and I are friends, so there might be some inside baseball or inside jokes along the way, but it was my view that Randi would be a great guest today.
Of course.
She has taken, I think it's fair to say, an atypical path from the beginning to where we are today. So, Randi, with that, why don't you lead us into the conversation by telling us in your own words, who is Randi Hutter Epstein and what do you do?
Well, gosh. Okay, so what I do, I'll start backwards. What I do is I teach and write about medicine. And so I guess my passion is accurate medical and science communication and public health communication, which I used to have to explain to people why it's important that we don't hear false things about medicine. And I'd have to find an anecdote to explain. But now I kind of think we've lived with all this stuff. It's like an easy thing. It's to explain. So that's what I do. How did I get there? Circuitously, because I'm one of those people that isn't very focused. I have a lot of interests, and so I kind of just studied liberal arts and liked science and liked writing and kind of liked drawing and all these different things. And then by the end of college, someone did mention, oh, well, if you like writing so much and you like medicine, you should do medical journalism. I didn't have any journalists in my family. I never thought about that. I didn't think of writing as something that you can do as a profession. So I ended up going to Columbia Journalism School, where I learned a ton because I knew nothing. I was a clean slate. which is a nicer way of saying I was completely ignorant going in. Like a lot of my classmates were like on the school newspaper for years, and their parents were in the business, and they knew all this jargon. I knew nothing, so they didn't have to I didn't have to unlearn any bad habits. I had nothing. I was a clean slate. And then I did toy with the idea of should I go to medical school or not? And that my dad was a doctor, he was a pathologist. So yeah, that was an influence. There was no, oh, we want you to be a practicing physician. But my dad, who was really intellectual, kind of thought, why wouldn't you want to learn more? Why wouldn't, if you want to write about something, why wouldn't you get educated in it? Why would you just spend years asking other people? So I did go on to medical school after journalism school, have an MD, but I did not do a residency or internship or anything. So I'm not licensed. I never practiced medicine. I used my, 4 years, but I did it in 5 years. I took time off, as many of my classmates did. So I used my medical education to inform the way I write about medicine. And I would say that, so I don't have the experience of being on the front line. I can't say, I know what it's like when there's all this stress around and this is how you have to make last minute decisions. Though I've been next to people that have, so I think I have a sympathy for it. I think from my little experience in medicine, compared to people like Larry's wife, that's an expert that has spent many, many years in training and clinical practice. I don't pull from that experience, but I pull from my little bit of experience of standing next to people and having had the wonderful privilege to be near people that have been in the throes of making those decisions.
It's such a unique journey that you've had, going to medical school but not practicing medicine, all of it. Let's take a deeper dive into how you got to where you are now, because you're obviously very knowledgeable. Were you always a good student? Did you grow up a good student? Was that always a part of what you wanted to do? You said your dad wanted you to get educated in this specifically because you showed interest. But when you were a little girl, was it like, I'm going to get straight A's and that's just the way it is?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't one of those kids, but I don't really know anybody that really is, it comes so easy. I didn't study because you did. No, I definitely was a studier, studied hard, played hard, but we can focus on the study hard part for this conversation.
We have to?
Yeah.
Of course we don't have to. Come on.
So, yeah, I would say, I'm not an efficient studier like my husband was. We went to college together. He could go and focus. I'm not good at, I don't want to say I'm not good at that. Some people have different kinds of attention spans. Mine is probably on the shorter end. So
you and I sound very similar.
I study a little, I take a break. But yeah, I did always work hard in school.
Initially, when we were all kind of pre-gaming this interview, one of my questions was, are you crazy? Having gone down your career path, meaning, obviously, journalism schools is no walk in the park. But then to couple that with medical school afterwards during your years, I mean, that is an unbelievably rigorous, academic journey. I understand, having read your bio and having seen some other interviews with you, you wanted to be an architect. Your initial thoughts were you would be an architect. So what were some of the similarities that you saw, let's say, between architecture and then before you finally made that decision that, I want to go to med school? Did you see any similarities in those disciplines?
I see there's creativity, a lot of observation. So I see that if I'm sort of pulling at things. Oh, you asked if I was crazy, but yes, but probably not, but in other walks of life.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I like to do practical jokes. I like to do things like that, but but I would say, in retrospect, it's very easy for me to say, I did this school, then I did this school, and then I did this. But at each step along the way, there was definitely, oh no, I made the wrong decision. Maybe I should drop out. Oh no, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. So for instance, medical school is kind of hard. Who would have thought that? So I did take time off to write. And then after I was in medical school for 2 years, and I would say I complained for, 3 years of the 2 years I was complaining about it. And then I did write a letter. I mean, I don't remember writing this letter, but I didn't send an email. It was in the 80s. Somehow,
So you have to send an actual letter.
somehow I communicated. It must have been a letter to the dean of students saying, like, thank you very much, but I don't think I'm going to be coming back. And I'm still friendly with him. He's well into his 90s. And we just went out for lunch recently. And he basically, like, my parents at that point were like, there's a limit as a parent what you can force someone to do when they're complaining that much. But he brought me into his office and said, I know what you're thinking, that the next 2 years are going to be a waste of your life. And, when you're in your 20s, every minute seems like this is a waste if, I have to go on. And it seems like all your friends are accomplishing so much by the time they're 24 and 25. I don't know. That's just sort of the image that I had of my friends.
I think you're right about that.
Right. People are writing and writing books and doing all this stuff. And, you read about it. And for me, it was like focusing on all these people that were doing really creative writing stuff. So he said to me, if you drop out now, it's going to look like you failed out. And the 2 years behind you was a waste of time. That's definitely a waste. If you finish up the next 2 years, you don't have the pressure of applying for residency. You can think of it as this amazing reporting project. You want to write about medicine, you'll see surgeries, you can do rotations in whatever you want. So I stayed. And so I basically have my MD just because of him, Dr. Robert Gifford, who's just a wonderful person. So it wasn't like, yes, I'm a good student, and yes, I do work hard. But I also am always questioning myself and thinking, actually, I didn't know that there was this podcast at the time called No Wrong Choices, because I was like, did I make a wrong choice? No one ever said to me there are no wrong choices, and there'll be a podcast one day with that.
Well, that we're hoping we're bringing that mission forward.
Exactly.
We didn't know that either. We thought this was a wrong choice.
So I do want to back up a second, though. So, when you were at Penn and you were studying architecture and you eventually decided to pivot towards medicine, it's my understanding that you actually wanted to be a journalist, but your passions were tied to medicine. And when you went into medical school, you kind of had a unique vision for what you were going to do with that part of your life. Is that accurate or no?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I was only in architecture for like a year, and then I took a science class and just a microbiology class, and was like, this is so interesting. I think I was so reluctant to go down that path because I was really close to my dad and he was a doctor, and I just didn't want to be like, oh, now you're just doing something because your dad is doing it. But I really found like I think architecture was fascinating and interesting, but there was something like, this is cool. This is life. Like, this is going on inside us. So I loved cell biology. And then I also liked to write, but I didn't consider myself a journalist or think about it. I just was like going along being a college student. Like, I mean, I think it's different. Kids are constantly thinking like, how am I going to use this to then do something after college? Like, I don't think I was thinking that. I was thinking, oh, yeah, if I end up going to med school, I should take the pre-med requirements that are like 8 classes. It wasn't that much. So like I did that, but I wasn't thinking like jobs and careers. I was just kind of figuring out I actually was like, what am I going to major in that super liberal arts that can count as a major? So
when you went to med school, you did go with the intention of becoming a doctor, and that changed over those next 4?
No, I went on my med school. I was so confused that when I was applying to med school, I still wasn't sure that it was the right route. So I thought, if I go on my medical school interviews and say, I do not want to practice, I just want to write about medicine. Oh, I want to write about medicine. And if they all say, we're not going to waste a space on you, then I'll be like, oh, okay, I needed a door to close in my face. Like now
Mhm.
I know that that's not, now I know that's a wrong choice. Thank you very much. But, and you know, a few of the schools did say like, why are we wasting a space on you? And I was like, I don't know. You're not going to, because you're not going to accept me. So don't worry about it. You're not wasting a space.
But the intention was always to write,
Exactly.
correct?
And I said it
was
on my
yeah.
interview, and I ended up at Yale Med School, and Yale definitely likes the strange people doing different things. They tend to be a more research oriented med school. So whereas they're very happy with someone getting an MD, PhD and doing research and not practicing, I think they saw me along that line. The guy who interviewed me, who was wonderful, who died at an old age recently, shockingly was like, that's a terrific idea. He had a heavy Southern accent that I'm not going to try to do now, but he basically, I thought he was going to say, we're not going to waste a space. And he was like, we need people who understand medicine to spend time explaining it. And this was in the 80s.
Wow.
We need people to understand what's going on in medicine. And do you know, we don't have exams at Yale, and we have the fewest class hours of any medical school. Yeah, so I was sold. I was sold on the no exams.
Sounds like my educational journey.
So how now? Obviously, you said that Yale was very open to your thought process as to what you want to do with your medical career. What about your peers at that point? How were they? Because obviously, many of them have probably gone on to become doctors, practicing doctors. So many of them were probably the same way along some of the other med schools you looked at, which were like, why did they waste a space on you? Someone could actually be here doing something. What were your peers like?
Fine. No one, I don't know. I want to speak for them. Let's just put it this way that, I had friends, we all got along. Nobody seemed resentful. I wasn't going to take their spot in residency, so they don't have to worry about that. But I'll say that, my daughter now just started med school, and she has the same anatomy professor that I had, like, over 30 years ago, and he's wonderful. And she said something to him like, I think you also taught my mom. And he said, yeah, I don't remember many medical students, but she was a real character. Yes, of course I remember. I'm not quite sure what he meant. I mean, I did really love anatomy, but yeah, I'll have to ask him next time I see him.
As you got towards the end of medical school, did you ever consider changing your mind? Did you ever consider going through and becoming certified and doing a residency?
There were moments. So twice, I was just thinking about this recently. It's funny because of the journalism background, people are like, you're going to love psychiatry and all the stories. You love kids. You're going to love pediatrics. I have 4 children and I do love kids. I love them when they're healthy. I found inpatient pediatrics killed me. My daughter might want to do something like that, but it was, it's hard to be like, well, those 5 years of your life were, you at least you got those good 5 years. Like I just found it very, very depressing. But I was fascinated with it. But I didn't think pediatrics at all. The few things I did love pathology, which my dad was a pathologist, which of course, like, you're going to do what your dad did. But I did love that. I did a pathology rotation, and I just thought, I remember holding a breast cancer, like not the human, the actual tumor. And I just found that fascinating. I'm like, whoa, I have cancer in my hand.
Wow.
Not spreading it, but like, so there was something fascinating about this is it. This is the disease. I just thought it was fascinating that. And then I had a day in a rehab center that we did a rotation at, or just spent a little time with in med school. And I just thought the doctors there were amazing. And so I did think for a moment, because I remember saying to doctors, this must be so depressing. You're dealing with people that had horrific accidents that then have to try to, if they can, maybe learn to walk again. And the doctors there were so wonderful, and they were like cheerleaders for their patients. And they said, no, it's not depressing. It's actually amazing to work with someone and get them from where they thought they're never going to walk again to at least to the next level. And there's this huge feeling of accomplishment. So there was moments, but that was just momentary things of admiring these doctors.
Not enough.
Yeah. I knew I wanted to write, and I knew I wanted to write during the day, and I knew I wanted a family. And, there's all this talk of being a woman and juggling career and family. And I just didn't know how 2 careers and family and life, like I didn't think I could do it all. So, yeah.
So that covers the medical aspect of your academic journey. Talk to us about your writing. How did you pursue that passion?
Yeah, right after college, I applied both to medical school and Columbia Journalism School. And I thought if I got into Columbia, which I did, I had an internship at the Times, and like that's what solidified. That's so cool that these people are hearing news and writing it. So I went, and it's only 1 school year, Columbia. So I went there right after. And then the decision was, do I go on to med school after, or do I just go out and try to, write as a medical reporter? So then I did, I went right to medical school right after journalism school.
Obviously, you said you worked at the Times before you even went to J school.
Oh, it was an internship.
I mean, an internship, pardon me. So what was your internship like? And how did you, as you say, it made you determine that this is the career path I want, this is the career path I want to go down. So what was that one moment? What was that one thing? Was it many things that said, this is what I want to do? I absolutely now know this is my calling.
Tell you how I got this internship. I knew nothing about journalism, nothing. Like I didn't realize that people apply when they're born to get an internship at the New York Times. And if you wait till nursery school, that's too late.
Wow.
And you've already been editor-in-chief of like Harvard Crimson or something. And so I applied, like really late, whatever. And I got like a rejection letter that was just like, are you serious? I think that's what the rejection letter said. And then after I got rejected, I got a letter or a call, whatever one did in those days, to say that the secretary in the science news office, that, everyone sat in the same room and all the journalists around, and the secretary sat in the middle, to field all the phone calls. She's going to be away for the summer. It's a paid job. Do you want to take over for her? You'll be answering phones, but we know you're interested. So you could see what's going on, and we'll fill you in on what's going on in the meetings. And I did get to write a teeny bit, I think a paragraph at the end of the summer, like a really short little news thing. So that's my internship. Like that's how I got.
So wait, so was it actually an internship? But it sounds like it was a paid gig.
Yeah, it was okay. So that
because back in the 80s, interns meant you like you worked for free,
right?
You got coffee.
It was a little paid gig. I did the coffee. I like was so like you're talking about me being a good student. Like people got their mail, I think, alphabetized. Like I was, like, here's your mail today. And I was really good at filing. And, I was really good at that stuff. And I'm still friendly with some of the people that were in the office then. But it was wonderful. And I worry about this with all this remote work, because if it were remote or anything like where if other people were working remote, I would have never had this opportunity. Every big time science medical journalist was like sitting all around me. I heard them on the phone. I heard what they were doing. I heard when they came back from meetings and talking about fighting to get their pieces on the front page. I heard all that, and I was just sitting there, but I made really good friends. They're really good mentors, and I learned a ton. So then I knew I'm sold. I want to do this. I want to hear medical news right away and try to make.
How many of those writers that were around you also had medical degrees or higher science degrees?
One, Larry Altman, who I'm still in touch with. He actually did a residency, and he was at the CDC, so studying infectious disease. And he's probably the first. Well, there's probably other before him, but I mean, he was one of the few. I mean, he went to the New York Times, I think, in 1965.
Did any of them, when you told them that you were planning to go to medical school, did any of them say that's a wrong move, smart move, anything like that?
I don't I don't remember.
Or did you even tell them?
Yeah, I don't think it was, it's funny. I never been asked that before. I don't think that, I think I was handing them their mail and filing things. Like, and they knew I was interested in writing, so they were really wonderful about telling me what they were working on. But I don't think anybody asked, like, what's your,
What are you doing next?
Yeah.
What are you doing next, kid?
Yeah, I don't know. I was more interested in hearing what they were doing. Yeah.
Well, and it clearly had an impact. So you go through that experience, you then go to Yale, you complete your medical degree there, and you're teed up. You're ready to run. So where did you run to from medical school?
Well, I got married, and my husband and I decided we wanted to live overseas, and he was able to get a job in London, and everyone said to me, "You're not going to be able to, find work, because in order to be a foreign correspondent, you have to put in your due diligence, at the United States, and then get launched overseas." So I was like, but as life happens, someone gave me the name of someone at the Associated Press, and I went to the Associated Press and met someone, and he said, "Well, we do have someone that's like freelance with us that covers theater, and he wants to be a theater writer. So he writes about all the theater for the Associated Press out of the London bureau, and then he can freelance outside." We do not like covering medicine. They sort of feared medical stories and would wait till the New York office said, "Why did you miss this story?" And then they would quickly cover it.
Interesting.
So they said, "If you want to do medical things for us, and we'll see how it works out." So that's what I did. So then I got this gig at the Associated Press, and it was a really wonderful office. I'm still friends with some of the people. It was just one of those lucky things that it was like a small bureau with the nicest editor, and he made our work like with a comma here and a tweak there. He made our stuff seem so much better. We hated when he went on vacation. Sometimes you work in places where you're like, "Yay, the boss is away this week." Like, we all panicked. It was like mommy's away for the week, and our copy's not going to be as good. Now what do we do? So it was really, and it was also stressful in the sense that, I got this job, and I had gone to journalism school, and I had written on deadline, but this was before the internet. And so the Associated Press and Reuters, and UPI, these wire services, were the first to get the news out. So when there was a tight deadline, you had 4 or 5 hours, and then it went around to the entire world. I did live in panic, like, I hope I didn't say 1,000, but it was really 10. I hope I didn't get the decimal point wrong. There wasn't fact checking. There was copy editing to make sure it sounded accurate, but there was no one was also reading the science article. So I would hand my copy in, and then I would wake up really early the next morning to go to the newsstand to buy like the major national newspapers in London to make sure that my story was like the same. Like, it wasn't like
Nice.
this, like my big fear would be like, this drug, I would write, "This drug really works." And then I'd go to the newspaper, and everybody else would be like, "Danger in this drug." And I'd be like, "Wait, did I just get something backwards?" So it never happened. I never got anything completely backwards. And I was actually good with the decimal points. I think I was so worried I checked things a million times. But it's great practice to not be, "Oh, this word or that word, which verb," and just write clearly and quickly and get it out there. Yeah.
I'm so glad you just talked about the precision that you have to have there. First of all, that sounds like a dream gig for you specifically, when you go overseas. I mean, that's amazing that gig happened for you. It sounds like the self-starting, the self-motivation in you is kind of what's driving your whole career at this point. Are you deciding what you're writing on? Like, how is it working? Like, I need to know this answer. This is something that's a void in the medical world, and I need to figure it out. And I guess that lends to that job and throughout your career. Like, how are you figuring out, this is something I'm fascinated with, so I'll do all the research and lay it out for the world? Or There's a real void here. We have to fix this void medically.
Yeah, I mean, I think it works both ways. I think, when I wasn't working on books, or what I tell my students, editors are always looking for ideas. And so it's great to be digging, and whether that's talking to experts, reading valid, but maybe like more obscure journals. There's like the New England Journal of Medicine and JAMA and things, but then there's also each specialty has their journal. I wouldn't call them obscure, but they're focused on a specialty. So when I was younger, I mean, I'm still young. I'm only in my 60s, but like when I
Exactly.
When I was a little younger, like 30s, like yesterday, I would
For all of us.
Yeah, I would send an editor a bunch of story ideas. And honestly, like oftentimes they would be like, no, 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 no. But they would see that I was hungry to work. And then sometimes they would say, well, but we are looking for someone to write about X. And sometimes I like, that's kind of not what I'm interested in writing. But you know what? You take what you can do. And I also found that I can't even, like, usually you get interested in it, or at least I do. Like, there's something interesting in every story, or you find it. So someone will be like, we need someone to write about whatever disease or whatever medical thing is going on. And so I'm like, oh gosh, that's so not of my interest. But it is. Like, I don't know, you start talking to people and you're like, oh, wow, this really is fascinating. Or it gets to the point where, well, how do I convince an audience member like how this is exciting? Because I can relate, because I didn't think so. I didn't want to be writing this story. So some of it's that, but oftentimes it is both hearing people, talking about their fears or what they don't know, or hearing something in medicine that I think people don't have the right information about, and trying to get a story that sets things straight. So it kind of goes both ways.
So when you're in London, I guess, how long were you there? And as we all did our homework and did our research, we know that you didn't just write for the AP. You added a lot of other projects and roles to that. So tell us about the momentum building and how your career really started to grow for you.
Yeah, so we were in London about 6 years. So I freelanced to other the newspapers there and magazines. There were more magazines then. It was fascinating just seeing the difference between working with American editors versus British. And so I freelanced there, and I also was the bureau chief, or the sole person. I was chief of myself of a publication called Physicians Weekly that I don't think it exists anymore. My editor there was amazing. And so that was writing, it went out to doctors. So it was writing medicine for doctors. And the other thing I always tell aspiring writers or journalists, like the one thing you really want is a good editor. To me, that's been more important than the publication almost, and who's going to be reading it. It's wonderful to have an editor that works with you. So that's a learning process and makes your writing better. So Physicians Weekly was like a mentor to me, the editor there, and he was wonderful. So that helped a lot. Now my book editor has been like a wonderful mentor to me to help, hone my ideas and my books. So yeah, I think I lean on all those people.
So I have two questions. The first one will be, have you ever had a full-time gig? Because it seems like your entire career has been kind of freelancing. To do that is incredible. To do that is remarkable, right? It's absolutely remarkable to make your livelihood off of essentially just freelancing your entire career. And then two, what makes a great editor great?
There's two different things. I mean, I've had, my last book had an amazing copy editor. I'm so indebted. She found like every crossed T that wasn't crossed, and which was wonderful. I think two things, to be able to see the holes in your story, to see something fresh and to know you, and to say, I think you can go deeper. I think you can make this point sharper. And I've always worked with editors. I guess think so, that haven't rewritten my stuff, but have pushed me. I've seen the weaknesses and the faults and said, I think you can hone this better, or this doesn't make sense. So then it's more of a learning curve versus handing someone something in and having them rewrite it. So yeah, so I guess that's what helps. And I try to do that in my teaching. I guess I consider myself more of an editor. Well, I am a teacher, but like I edit their things and it's
Sure.
hard. I try to edit my students in a way that I push them to come up with this solution. Even
I think any great editor is also a teacher. I mean, even in the real world,
yeah,
so to speak.
exactly.
We'll get back on the journey part in a second, but while we're here, talk about the pressure of getting it right. I can't imagine the amount of research that you have to do to write in the medical field. It is very precise. Have you ever been worried about getting it wrong, like truly wrong? I mean, that has to be a lot of pressure for you to take those facts. You know, this is not a fiction. This is nonfiction writing, and you have to be precise and correct and organized and thorough. So talk to me a little bit about that pressure while we're here.
Oh, I live in that panic all the time. Let me add to this. I'll just add to those stresses. There's the stress of getting it right. And I do have then my sources that I'll call back and read. And I can, now that I've been doing it for so long, there's people I trust that I can say, hey, this is what I think. Am I getting this right? Especially if I'm not on the tightest deadline. But I want to add that it's not, in addition to the data and the specifics, I talk to a lot of patients, and I never want them to feel that I've said something that'll humiliate them, or that misrepresents them, or that I use a term that they might find offensive. So I know that a lot of times in journalism, there's on the record and off the record. And if they forgot to say off the record, you could play gotcha. And I just kind of feel all those rules go down the tubes when I'm talking to someone who has been ill and they are giving me details of their illness. And there's some journalists that like to say, oh, we're giving them a voice. Yeah, maybe, but we're also exploiting their story so that our work looks better. You have someone give you all these intimate details on what went through and what happened and how they've suffered and how they've survived. And we are happy because that makes us look better. We got it. We got them to talk to us. We got them to open up. My byline gets on the story. So I feel because I've exploited their story, maybe, yes, they'll feel happy for getting a voice. I always read back exactly how it's going to say, how they're going to sound, and give them the opportunity to say, oh, right, I did tell you that, but you know what? Actually, no, can you leave that part out? And, and then I will. So I'll add that to the worry that I hope that someone doesn't. It's never happened, but I'll always worry about that someone will say, oh, I hate that word, or you referred to me as having a certain disease, but I like to say it's with that syndrome. Like even little
Right.
words can make someone feel
Interesting.
like that their identity has been blurred or something. Yeah.
So, Randy, as we come back to your journey and look at your accomplishments to date in terms of where we are, I guess we're in London. You've been writing for a while. You're there for 6 years. Eventually, you come back. I'm aware that you have 4 wonderful children who are all incredibly accomplished people. What was that like for you in terms of having a career, having a dream, having a passion, having a vision, and having 4 children at the same time? And did you learn from that experience? Did going through motherhood in any way impact your writing? Like, I'm just kind of curious about that dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, so my first son was born in London, and then I was pregnant with twins when we moved back here. And that did affect my career choices because I was looking around to see if I could land like a full-time newsroom gig. And then I realized that there's no such thing as working 9 to 5 in a newsroom then. And I would have 2 babies and a 2-year-old or 2.5. And like I just couldn't see if there was like a major great news story and they needed a staffer to go off for a week. I just didn't want to be that person with 3 little kids. So I came back knowing that, okay, I'll freelance. And then one of my professors from med school, who was wonderful, he did a sabbatical in London. And it's just interesting when you look back on decisions you make because they just seem different and whatever. But he had said to me, he was a pediatrician at Yale and wonderful. And so he said to me when I was moving back, he offered me the opportunity to go on the wards and 1 or 2 days a week and just shadow and be on the wards with the pediatricians. And if at the end of the year, I thought, wow, you know what? I changed my mind. I could do this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, then he would let me join the program. And he said, and if not, no hard feelings. It would just be an interesting experience for your writing. But, you know, which sounds wonderful and doable. But at that moment, I was just moving back to the States, and my son, as boys tend to be, was like really attached to me, and he was 2.5. And, you know, America then was a foreign country to him. And I just thought, like, now I'm going back and forth to Yale all the time, and it feels so close. But at the time I thought, you know, I liked picking him up from school and we hung out after nursery school. And I just couldn't see myself being like, oh, I'll be home in 3.5 hours. So, yeah, so I didn't do it. So I just couldn't leave my son then. And so, yeah, like it seems like nothing now. It would have been 2 days a week. But at the moment, I was just like, I don't think so. So I didn't.
So you turned your attention to family?
Yeah.
And are you freelance writing at that point? Are you writing at all?
I was
What does that look like?
freelancing, and I was gathering material for my first book. I wasn't getting as much accomplished as I wanted to because those twin babies take up a lot of time. Yes, I was trying to freelance as much as I could. I was working on my book as much as I could. But I was constantly thinking, God, I'm not getting as much done as I should.
Now, I'm curious about the book. What was the inspiration? What was the title? And how long did it take you to actually write that first book?
So my first book is about the history of childbirth. The title is called Get Me Out, A History of Childbirth from the Garden of Eden to
Greatest title ever.
Thank you. Yeah, and that book came around not because of my pregnancies and not because of childbirth or even an interest in OBGYN. It actually came about because when I first started reporting on medicine right after medical school, I'm always so like naive plus optimistic, I think. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get these breaking news stories. It's going to say, here's a new study that shows X. I'm going to interview experts. I'm going to publish this story. And then doctors are going to be like, thank you for this new information based on really good data. And now I'm going to change what I do when I go to work tomorrow. And then I was like blown away by, you know, doctors who I thought were old. They were probably 45. I was blown away by, you know, doctors saying, wow, really great study. That makes so much sense. Oh, are you going to incorporate this into your practice? Well, not really, because, you know, I've been practicing medicine for 20 years. And so I then got really fascinated with like, then how did doctors change their minds? You know, like what? I mean, if science isn't going to make you change your mind, like what is? So I got very interested in decision making of doctors and then doctor-patient relationships. I was just like kind of reading in history of medicine and gathering information. And then I gravitated to OBGYN because I found that was the most fascinating relationship between doctors and patients, because you can be the smartest person in the world, but you're in pain or you have a horrible rare disease. And at some point, you're just going to say to your expert doctor, fine, okay, sure, do it. You're a healthy woman who wants to get pregnant or planning on getting pregnant, and you choose a doctor, and the doctor's like, you know, this is the way I see childbirth and pregnancy. And you're like, well, I don't, so I'm going to go to someone else. Or no, I'm not going to go to someone else, but here's how we're going to talk about this. So I was very interested in that dynamic, especially in pregnancy, because you can actually get pregnant without going to a doctor, shockingly. And you can even give birth without going to the, smartest OBGYN in the world. So I was really interested in that relationship. When did women become such control freaks, saying like, I'm just going to eat this and my baby will be perfect, or I'm just going to do that. And then looking at the whole business of fertility and what's going on. So that's how I gravitated. And so I just started reading a ton of history books and books that were written way back when, and talking to women and archives and collecting information. And then at a certain point, I think my husband was like, either you're going to just collect information forever, or you're going to focus this on a book proposal and get it out to an agent. So, and then I did. Yeah.
At what point did you begin your teaching career, and how do you relay this passion that you have for your writing, for medicine, for science? How do you relay that to your students?
Well, I started teaching, I'd have to look at my resume, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. I don't know, something like that. First, I co-taught a class with a woman at CUNY Journalism School who's wonderful, and I learned a ton from her, Emily Labor Warren, who runs the science writing at CUNY, and she's amazing. And I was so fortunate that she asked me to co-teach something with her, and I learned a ton. And then I served as a thesis advisor at Columbia Journalism School. Now I teach profile writing there. And then I taught this course that I developed the syllabus with another person, Kathy Schufro, who's also interested in medical writing. We developed a syllabus together at Yale. And I hope I get my passion across to my students. They have to write a lot. They know that I obsessively go through all their papers. So for better or worse, they're seeing that I care about every comma they put down.
So you got into teaching. I looked at your LinkedIn profile as you were giving your last answer. So from what I can tell, it began in 2009, about 15 years ago.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, as you're developing that skill set, how scary is it to go into a classroom for the first time? And how do you get good? Like how do you master those skills?
Yeah, I'm constantly thinking, how could this class have gone better? Trying to keep students not bored, hoping that they did the reading. I'm just constantly tweaking it. And I think I've just learned through the years that students really mostly want you to care about them and care about educating them. And I do feel that they're paying a lot of money, or someone's paying money for them, or somehow they earned a scholarship. And so I feel like I'm working for them, and I want them to come out of the class and then forever and ever in their life hear my nagging voice in their head when they I will hear from students years later saying, we had to write this piece, I'm in medical school, or we had to do this. And I could hear you saying like, no, you don't need all those adverbs. That's too long. That you can simplify that. So I'm like, that's what I want to hear. I want my nagging voice to be in your head.
What do you get the most gratification from? Is it the teaching? Is it that initial reward? Is it writing a book, seeing it be successful? Lectures? Where do you get your most fulfillment?
Well, I would say after I've written something that I think, after many rewrites, I think I've like, oh, that's what I wanted to get across. So that's a great feeling. I would say when I leave a classroom, my husband always says like, how did it go today? I'm like, I don't know. I always say that. I don't know. I think it went okay. I don't know. So I don't think I can leave a classroom and be like, wow, that was great, because I'm always thinking, so-and-so looked a little bored. Did he not get sleep, or could I have been a little more energetic? Did I let the conversation go 6 minutes too long? When I hear from students at the end of the year, or I spoke to a student's mother, actually, because in a circuitous way we got connected. And she was my student, not the mother, the daughter was my student a few years ago. And the mother said, we're so thrilled that you were the one that actually encouraged our daughter to write. She never thought about it, and she's actually gotten some, published. She's been published, and I didn't realize that. So, I love, so it's always sort of years later we're all hear things like that. So I guess that too.
All right. So before I ask you whether you were an advocate for patients or an advocate for medicine, you were an advocate, and you said you were an advocate for the truth. So now, do you consider yourself a teacher or a writer?
I think both, but I'm going to add, I'm an advocate for my students. Like
Okay.
they're applying for something and they did well in my class, or they're not, or they're just like, I will like write them the best letter of reference or figure out who I know. Like, I feel like I will be, I feel like this, how could they not hire my former student? So I feel very attached. Once you're in my class, you're like stuck in my web, and I feel very, I don't know, I just feel
Possessive. You
I
feel
feel
very possessive about that.
possessive that they're better than other people and they deserve that job. And I want to push to make sure that they can get ahead. And nothing makes me more excited than, other than my own kids, like hearing from a student their successes. One of my students went off to get a PhD and invited me to hear, when they do their oral presentation. And just to see students that might have been nervous or freshman or sophomore when they were in my class, and now they're like practicing medicine or they're confident. And yeah, I just love that. I just love that.
While we're on this subject, I do want to get your point of view on something. So the times are changing very quickly. You've been teaching for a long time at this point. We've now established it's been about 15 years. And as AI begins to creep its way in, and knowing that you are teaching journalism.
Nice example. Look at her face.
We just lost our guest.
Yes, my God.
But, I'm curious. This is something that you certainly need to be aware of. This is something that you certainly need to address, I'm assuming, with your students. How do you teach your kids to accept, work around, deal with? Like, what is your approach to AI, particularly when it comes to writing and journalism?
Yeah, I'm actually taking notes here because I have to remember I want to talk about it in my class on Monday now that you've said that. What I did in my Columbia class last semester, this isn't my brilliant idea. It's actually a math professor at Berkeley told me he did this. And I thought, oh, I'm going to do this too. So he assigned his upper level math students a math, whatever upper level math student people do. And then he said, I want you to do it. And then I also want you to feed it to AI, Chat GPT, and see how they did it. And let's compare, and so then what I did for my students, they had a simple little assignment. And I said, I want you to do it. And then I want you to feed it into Chat GPT or one of the AI things, and hand them both in and let's compare. And what we got a kick out of, the Chat GPT was so much more cliched. And, and you could see that it was so formulaic in a bad way. And yes, I know you could say, well, wait 5 years and it's not going to sound that way. I'm a really low tech human. I don't know how to turn my television on. I don't know how to do things. If it's more than an on off switch, I don't know how to do it. The whole thing of AI writing stories freaks me out. What worries me, and I don't think I'm going to be able to accomplish this, at least single-handedly, is, and I just put it down to remind my students this semester, because I didn't yet, but my students last semester, like, I think that there's the part of the joy and frustration of writing is that blank page and that act of creation that goes from like blank page to actually coming up with an idea. And in life, that's just this wonderful feeling of, oh my God, like I actually had those thoughts in my head. Like I framed this. That's kind of cool. It was frustrating, but then you created something.
What about AI incorporating into modern medicine? We just did a story recently about how pretty soon you will not, when you have an eye doctor's appointment, it will be rare for you to actually speak to an eye doctor because the AI is much better at diagnosing your problem and more accurately.
Yeah.
So are we moving? So is that something you see,
Yeah,
or are you worried about that in modern medicine as well?
and it's funny. So, my dad, may he rest in peace, like this, I would be curious what he was thinking now, but even in like the 80s or 90s, whatever technology was coming into pathology, he was, and this has sort of brainwashed me into it takes a human. Like, he was very much like you have to know their whole disease and you have to know everything. And there's good pathologists and there's lousy ones. And you don't just want, and machines can't take over. Well, I think, right, there are some technologies that the machine can see things better. I think we're going to need humans too. And I just heard recently, and I don't know her name because I can't remember it, but somebody in medicine who studies AI. So this is not my thought. It's her thought that on the positive side, what could happen is if we have AI better at diagnosing certain things, then the doctor's role, it will free up doctors to be able to have the conversations and explain what's going on. There's so many doctors saying, like, I'm staring at electronic medical record. I'm doing this. I don't have that much time. So she was saying, maybe this will provide doctors with the time to say, here's what this machine just diagnosed. Here's what this machine is seeing. Let me sit down and explain this to you and go over what it means. Because just I think some people have already experienced this, that if you've gone to the doctor and you get your electronic medical records results back before the doctor can read it to you, like, you don't know what all these lab results mean. So you're going to need a human to explain it because we're not a bunch of data. We're humans where certain data points mean certain things. So we're going to need that. But I heard an interesting anecdote of someone said he didn't even tell me what it was, but he had some medical issue and he couldn't figure out pain in his arm or whatever it was. And he was going to all these different specialists, and he was a doctor. He had access to all these great specialists, and everybody was seeing his illness from their own specialty, and he was getting frustrated.
Right.
He fed it into Chat GPT or whatever computer thing, and here's what he said: I never felt so listened to until. Isn't that fascinating?
That's the frightening part of it, right? That's the frightening part.
The computer listened to every single part of your story and then analyzed and actually gave him the best feedback, versus the orthopedic surgeon just was paying attention to one slice and the neurologist paying attention to another slice and dismissed all the other stuff. So yeah, it's weird.
Getting back to your career journey a little bit, I have to ask this question. I encourage you to be as vague as you want to be. But there's people out there listening right now who really want to know, like, you found this very specific niche and carved it out. You're a specialist in a very tight window, and that's important because it enables you to be who you are. Is it lucrative, or do you have to teach and write and do all these things to piece it together, or is it just because you love it?
It's because I love it. It's not lucrative at all. There was a great article. I keep forgetting the names, but if someone Google, there was a great article in the New York Times about why we should pay teachers a lot more. It was written so well. No, it's not lucrative at all. I love what I do, but yeah, you don't, and actually for freelance writing, a lot of the fees that we get, it's something that we writers bitch about all the time. I think the fees are about the same as they were in 1990.
Wow.
Some lower.
That's
because people want you to write for free also, which was unheard of in the 90s. But now it's like, well, we have this new website, we have this new blog. Yeah.
So the question then becomes, so how do you relay that to your kids? Obviously, the media landscape has changed, right? So newsrooms are taken to the bone in many senses, and we see what happens. We've seen what's happened with a number of large papers. They've shut down, they've cut staff. I mean, recently, Vice News is going to fire essentially their entire staff. and
LA
shut down. A
Times.
company that was once valued at like $5 billion now is like essentially worth nothing. What do you tell your kids now about the nature of the business?
It's funny. I was talking to my journalism students last semester. I mean, as I told you, I'm terrible about predicting the future. I do think that we will always need news. We will always need accuracy. The jobs may not be in print newspapers. That I don't think so. Somehow people will be getting their news, whether it's in a podcast or whether it's video or whether it's online or on their watch, God forbid. Hopefully we will find ways, because people, I do think, will push for this, that they're going to want more than a one-liner, that they're going to want more than a breaking news that they can like read in little like snippets on their phone.
Yeah.
So I do believe people want to know things, and somehow it'll get funded and somehow there'll be advertising for it.
You are a lot less cynical than I am in that sense. I just don't think that people want to learn as much as they used to. I think, when you and I are not the same age, where there's a little bit of difference between us, but we came up in the same ways that, where newsrooms were big, there were a lot of people in them, and there were people who wanted to learn stuff. I think now we just live in an age where there's a lot of echo chambering.
And we should point out that Tushar works in the CBS newsroom, so he does know what he's talking about.
No, I know, you're right.
I don't know. Look, I don't want to be right. And I'm not a futurist either. I don't want to be right. Don't tell me I'm right.
All right. Let's have some fun. You seem like you're great at parties, Randy. I'm convinced of it.
Tell us. I'm good.
Yes, she is. I was at one a few weeks ago. It was fantastic.
Honestly, can I just say that I hate the word, like I hate that overused, like what's your superpower? Like I just hate that. I feel like it's just depressing. It feels like what a therapist would tell you, like if you're horribly depressed. No, you have a superpower. But so I don't want to use that cliche, but I do have to say with confidence, I told you I stress about accuracy in my writing. I stress about teaching. I stress about this. If you said to me in an hour, can you host a party for 100 people? I could do it. I could do it.
That is your superpower.
I wouldn't worry.
That is a superpower.
And I wouldn't worry. Because it's just a party. And if you think I failed, I don't care. I actually don't.
Okay,
But
fair enough.
As long as you got free food and booze, we're good.
Yeah.
That's right. Martinis for everybody. You must have come across like strange medical facts, funny things about the medical, like your anecdotes in just watching your videos and reading your stories are immense. What's the craziest thing that you've learned in your research that just blew your mind? I hate to put you on the spot. See, this is the pressure we were talking about before.
I know. Can we just talk fun, weird facts?
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course. That's all we want.
That's what it's about.
How about let's not talk about the actual fact, but things that I've done to get facts. Can I change
Yeah,
love it. Done.
So,
Love it.
So I was looking at, you're probably the wrong audience for this, but when I was working on my stress book, I thought, oh, this is like, I just finished like a kind of depressing chapter and I wanted something funnier. So, and again, wrong audience here with the three of you, but like, I don't know, what's funnier than men can't get it up when they're stressed out? It doesn't stress me out at all. And so then I thought, well, I don't want to hear some guy's like, woe story, or whatever. There's got to be someone that's done some animal research on this. Somebody had to have, like, stress and performance anxiety.
Interesting.
So I spent a while trying, and I found a wonderful researcher who was doing it for some drug development too. Like it was pre-Viagra when he was doing this research, and he stressed out these little rats, poor guys. and then they would monitor how long it took these rats when they were stressed to get erections. It took them longer. And then I was like, oh, if I'm describing this as one has to when you're writing, you need all the details to describe it. So I was going back and forth with him trying to figure out, like, how big is the average rat's erection, which was like,
and what kind of foreplay did they like?
I think it was something like, and I'd have to check my notes, but it might have been something like 2.8 millimeters or something like that. But then I was saying to him, I'm gonna need, like, people don't know what that is. We were literally going back and forth. He actually found a certain kind of barley. Like, he actually had a specific strain of barley that was the exact size of a rat's erect penis.
Why?
And then I was like, but I don't know if that metaphor will land, because you'd have to know either the rat's penis or that specific thing. But we did end up coming out with a Q-tip nub, like the little top of a Q-tip. And so that's a fun fact. I'm not sure. I don't know if it's useful. But I spend a lot of time trying to get the details right. So
Specificity, of course.
right? Yeah. And I live in New York City, and honestly, like, we live on such a rat infested block, and I'm not like worried about their performance anxiety. Like,
with that, Randy, this has been absolutely fascinating. Typically, we end our episodes on, what advice do you have for a young person who wants to follow in your footsteps? I think you've shared a lot of that already, but if there was one thing you could point at, one, nugget of wisdom for somebody coming up in the journalism field, what would you tell them?
Know your subject, read a ton, know your subject, and keep up the excitement. I mean, you have to just, I know we hear a lot of false news, and it's so easy to dumb things down, but there are going to be people, there will that really want the truth. And I think, and then gravitate towards the stories that excite you. I know I said that you're going to be handed stories to do and find the excitement, but yeah, you have to keep your own passion up and your own energy up.
That's great advice. And we have to give you this opportunity as well. I know that you have a couple of books out. I think you're working on another, and we'll keep that off the record for now. But if people want to learn more about you and read your stuff, what are the titles and where should they go?
Oh, they can go to my website, randihutterepstein.com. And then, my first book is Get Me Out, A History of Childbirth from the Garden of Eden to the Sperm Bank. And the second one is Aroused, the history of hormones and how they control just about everything.
I just got that on audiobook, by the way.
Thank you.
Amazing titles. Well, Randy, thank you for allowing me to convince you to join us today and for joining us.
This has been such a pleasure. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, that was Randi Hutter Epstein, and I hope that she lived up to all of the expectations I set coming into this conversation. Larry Shea, what are your reactions?
Well, I think she just taught us all a thing or two, didn't she? I want her as my teacher, like, for the rest of time. Like, the anecdotes, the energy, as you said. The biggest takeaway I have is just self-motivating, just self-starter, Like, this is the kind of career that you carve out if you truly love what you're doing. She said it blankly. I love what I do. And it's not for the money. It's not for anything else. It's because she loves to ask that question and research the answer and figure it out. And it's just a testament for me to the idea that if you want it bad enough, if you love what you do, you can find that little bit of pocket of perfection, right? It's the teaching world. It's the medicine world. It's her writing, which is obviously most pivotal in her life, and with the teaching coupled now. But it's also the balance of family. Like, she has 4 kids as well. Like, you got to be kidding me. She did it all. It's super impressive. Not the smartest person in the room when she's in the room with you, I promise. And
you will never be.
You will never
you mean
be.
you, not her.
me, right? Me. I'm not the smartest.
All of us.
Anyone in the room with her. Her husband must feel like, no, kidding. In all seriousness, she's a super impressive person and remarkable conversation. And she gave us so many insights into how you can match that to your career journey. And so we thank her for that.
I appreciate the fact that she is a journalist in the truest sense, right? She is, I asked her quite plainly, do you advocate for patients? Do you feel yourself you're an advocate for doctors or for medicine? And it's no, I'm a journalist first, which means I'm an advocate for the truth. And now she's become an advocate for her students. It's tough. I've obviously been in the news game now for, almost 20 years at this point. And you do become a bit cynical, right? You become a bit cynical about what people want to learn, what people want to know, and especially now in this day and age, how the business has become, where newsrooms are brought to the bone. But to still have that type of hope and light out there to tell kids, tell kids these days, there's still that need for true journalists, for those who are going to ask tough questions, for those who are going to go out and try and find the truth. Yes, that's what keeps me motivated. I think it's what keeps all of us motivated. And I'm glad that there is someone on the vanguard like a Randi Hutter Epstein still trumpeting that charge.
Yeah, and I can build upon that with a little bit of context. I do know Randi and I know her husband, and they're wonderful people. And what Randi is putting forward is as genuine as you could ever imagine, meaning I have been to, more than one event at their house in support of a writer. I have been to more than one event at their house in support of a local bookstore. And I've met her students, and they are involved and they're engaged. And she is absolutely living what she preaches day in and day out. And it's a really wonderful thing to see. And for me, as somebody who has been teaching, I've certainly learned a fair amount from her in terms of how to handle my day-to-day and how to approach that stuff. So just a remarkable, remarkable woman.
And she loves to throw a party.
That she sure does, and they're good ones. The last one, I think, had two names on the different signature drinks. It was great.
That's great.
Did she put it together in an hour?
Exactly.
Was it an hour or more?
Exactly. So with that, Randi, thank you so much for joining this episode of No Wrong Choices. We also thank you for joining us. If this episode made you think of an inspiring person in your life who could be a great guest, please send us a note via the contact page of our website at nowrongchoices.com. We also encourage you to connect with us on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, X, and Threads. On behalf of Tushar Saxena, Larry Shea, and me, Larry Samuels, thank you again. And always remember, there are no wrong choices on the road to success, only opportunities, because we learn from every experience.